Hey, Witch Mob! Welcome to the Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast. If your ideal vacation includes lounging in hammocks and reading books, Secret Garden could be the perfect spot for you. From observing iguanas to watching hummingbirds, picking fresh tropical fruit from the garden, and walking to the beach, you can do as little or as much as you like. Secret Garden is an eco-house where you can get away from it all and truly relax. Make your booking on Instagram or Facebook at Secret Garden Mompiche. The links are in the show notes. Use the code WITCHPOD for a 20% discount on a 6-day stay. So this week, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to start with a comment I received on Spotify from Angela Sherry from the USA. She left a 5-star review and her comment says, "If you like to travel, this is the podcast for you. Ronnie takes us through the most beautiful parts of the world with descriptions of places you should not miss, mixed with some of the most no fucking way did that just happen moments. Ronnie's knowledge of traveling can lead you on your own adventures of a lifetime." That's amazing. I love that comment. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all your comments. I get emailed comments and questions, but this is the first comment on Spotify, so I really appreciate it. Speaking of questions, I have received a couple of bonus questions from the questions episode, but I didn't answer them on the episode because they were just such complex questions. There's 2 questions in particular, but when I thought about them, I felt like the answers to those questions needed some space of their own. And so that's what we're going to do today. This is going to be a shorter podcast. We're not reading a story. We're going to be looking at these 2 questions. Oh, there was a 3rd question as well, and the answer to that is no, Matt. I'm very happily single. One of the questions that gave me a lot to think about, and I've been thinking about it for a little while now, is if you could go back in time, what would you change? Now, I know this is supposed to relate to the travel stories in the book and the podcast, but honestly, if I was to go back in travel stories, there's probably a couple of little things I would change that probably wouldn't make that much of a difference in my life today. But if I honestly think about my whole life and going back and changing something, I would go back further than my own life. I would go back to before I was born. I would go back to maybe 1965. My parents had just married. My mother was pregnant with me. My father was just sent to Vietnam. So maybe I'd go back then to that point in time. My mother was living with my father's parents in Launceston, Tasmania. I'd go back to that time and I would take out the pedophile who abused me when I was a child, because that monster devastated every single facet of my life. It's still being affected today. My son is affected by that man, and his daughter, my granddaughter, is affected by that man. So honestly, if I was to go travel back in time, I would go take out the pedophile. I would kill him. He'd have an accident, a heart attack, something quiet, something almost unnoticeable, something that nobody would really investigate. Oh, this old guy had a heart attack, you know. Back in the 60s, that would have been no big deal. So something like that. So I would go back and I would take out this monster that destroyed not only my life that I've spent literally a lifetime trying to put back together, absolutely devastated my family. You know, it's been said that one event can have a devastating rippling effect over all kinds of things and all kinds of people. This monster and I'm going to keep saying monster because that's what he was. He was a fucking monster. He destroyed my family. He destroyed my relationships with all my members of my family. He destroyed my relationships with my parents. He destroyed my relationships with my siblings, particularly the relationships with my sisters. When we were children, we were really close. We did a lot of things together, and now there could not be more distance between us. And he did that. And with my aunts, with my uncles, with my cousins, he destroyed every single part of my family by what he did to me and to other people in my family. He was a prolific pedophile in my family and probably beyond. There's a good chance he went beyond the family as well. And so that's what I would do. If I could go back in time, I would change that one thing. People say if you go that far back and change something, well, that could also have a ripple effect into the future. Would I be here today where I am today? Maybe not. Maybe I wouldn't have the book full of crazy travel stories. Maybe I wouldn't have the devastating experiences with relationships that I've had over the last 40 years. Maybe I wouldn't have had the life that I've had, although I will say that if I went back to the time when my mother was pregnant with me, then I would still exist and my father would still be in the army and we would still have that army brat life. And I'm pretty sure that wouldn't affect my siblings because the loss of that man would not have deeply really affected anyone except maybe for his wife. And maybe she would have been less of a monster without him. She maybe would have regained some humanity. Maybe, I don't know. I honestly don't know. She was as bad as him. But maybe if he hadn't been around to do all the harm that he did, maybe she would have been different too. Maybe she would have been a better person. Maybe my mother would have been a better person. You know, so having that awful, awful influence taken from their lives, maybe everybody would have turned out better, not having to deal with this fucking monster all the time. So maybe we would have all had much better lives without him there. And I don't know how the ripple effect of that would have turned out. I know I would still exist. I'm pretty sure my brothers and sisters would still exist. I'm pretty sure all my cousins would still exist. I think those relationships would have still happened. I've been thinking about this for a long time, so I think that if there was one thing I would change in the world, if there was one thing I would go back in time and change, it would be that. I would take the monster out of my life. Remove the demon. Just get rid of him altogether. And, you know, I did. I already did that. I did it 20 years ago. I put him in prison and he died in prison. But there's still this family divide, you know. There's people who accuse me of killing him because he died in prison. There's people in my family, aunts, that he paid off to take his side. I mean, you couldn't give me any amount of money to support a pedophile, but that kind of tells you who they are. And so if he hadn't been there in the first place, if he had died, you know, back in the 60s, just after my parents got married and just after my mother got pregnant with me, that ripple effect could have been extremely positive for everybody. It could have been a freedom for everybody to have a better life. It could have been all kinds of positive effects to have the monster taken away. So I don't think it would have been too devastating for too long to too many people just because of who he was. He was a horrible person, absolutely horrible person. Even when he wasn't abusing children, he was a horrible person. And so I kind of feel like being free from him would have made all of our lives better. And would we all be where we are today? I don't know. I don't know. The traveling part of the army brat thing is what put me traveling around the world. So maybe I would still have traveled. Maybe I still would have done all the crazy things I did, but I wouldn't have had the rage. I wouldn't have had the depression. I wouldn't have had the determination to die. At one point, I had a death wish, and all I wanted to do for several years was just die. And I did crazy things to help that happen. And fortunately, I survived all the craziness, but I could have definitely lived without it. I could have lived a more normal life. I sometimes wonder, one of the questions in the question session was, did I have any regrets? I don't have regrets per se, because everything that's happened has happened. And obviously I can't change anything. And this is clearly some kind of fantasy, revenge fantasy, whatever. That's clearly not going to happen. And this old monster is dead anyway. I killed my own demons. So what I think about every so often from time to time is all the potential that was taken away. My mother wanted me to be an academic, for example. Would that have been possible had this monster not been in my life? I don't know. We're never going to know. But I do think sometimes about all the lost potential, all the lost opportunities, all the lost things that could have been so different. I might have been able to have a healthy relationship in my life. So far, it's never happened. I'm pushing 60. I've never had a healthy relationship ever. So maybe that could have happened. I don't know. But that is the answer to my question. If you could go back in time, what would you change? I would take out the motherfucker who hurt me when I was a child. And not just me, but lots of other little girls. And I think our lives overall would have been the better for it. So I know that's a tough answer. I know that's a hard question. And I talk about killing people a little bit throughout the podcast. So yeah, that may seem like a brutal answer. It might seem harsh. It might seem mean, nasty, negative. But I feel like the end result of him not being around in any of our lives would have been overall a positive result. I think the ripple effect there would have been a lot more positive than the actual result that he caused, the devastating effects of what he did. I still have to live with today. And I think that's just how it is. And we all have to live with whatever. But the whole generational trauma being passed down from my mother to me, to my son, to my granddaughter, I think that could have been largely avoided if the monster had been taken out before he had a chance to hurt any more people. So, yeah, I know that's a very long answer, but that's how it is. The second question that I was sent via email, you talk a lot about mental illness. Could you talk more about that and how it affected your travels and your life? Okay, so I just spent quite a long time talking about the reason why I have mental illness. I was sexually abused as a child from the age of 4 years old until I was 16 years old, and that messed up my head. That gave me all kinds of different mental illnesses. I have PTSD, obviously, from the abuse. I have OCD, which is kind of strange and weird because I like things to be very much in order, and it feels weird when they're not. But I've been working on that one and trying to just let things go a lot of the time. And I have bipolar disorder. I don't really know where the bipolar comes from, if it's genetic or if it's environmentally induced. I kind of feel like that wouldn't have existed if the monster hadn't existed. But I think the pedophile was the main cause of the bipolar. I have finally found a place in the world where it's stable and controllable, and I do a lot of therapy with pets. I live by the beach, so walking on the beach, getting in the ocean. I make sure my diet is filled with foods that make my brain happy. I try to control the ups and the downs a little bit better than I would have in the past. And so how it affected my travels and my life mental illness has absolutely destroyed any possibility for a healthy relationship. And I'm now at a point where I'm like, fuck this. I don't need a relationship. I don't want a man in my life. I don't need a man in my life. I've got absolutely zero interest in having a partner. My OCD is pretty much under control. I kind of twitch a little bit if my pots are not in the same order as I left them, especially when there are volunteers in the house and they're washing dishes and cleaning up after themselves, etc., and they don't put things back in the places where I like to have everything. That can make me itchy. So it's weird. Rather than freak out, I used to freak out when things weren't in the order I needed them to be in. So rather than freak out nowadays, I just quietly put everything back in the order where it's supposed to be, where I like it to be, and that makes sense to me. So I do that. And then PTSD, I've spent a lot of time on PTSD, and I can't stop the triggers, and the triggers are sensory. Very often they're smell, like the smell of lavender. I cannot stand the smell of lavender, and it takes me back to a garden I didn't want to be in when I was 4 years old. The PTSD triggers can be quite strong. It can be the sound of a voice. It can be a smell. It can be a taste of something, although I usually have pretty good control over what I'm eating, so I don't usually have those flavors, those childhood flavors anymore, apart from one particular soup that my paternal grandmother used to make that was amazing vegetable soup that I absolutely loved. And there's no triggers attached to that soup at all. PTSD triggers happen, but my reaction is pretty much under control. But while I was traveling, the depression, the mania, the craziness, a lot of the crazy stories came from the mania, or came from the depression, or came from a place of absolutely not giving a single fuck about myself at all. And some of those stories came from trying to die, because for a long time, I just wanted to die. For many of those years, particularly the years traveling in Europe, I was looking for ways to die. I was taking too many drugs. I was hanging out with bad people. I was doing all kinds of crazy things and looking for ways to die. I survived the entire experience. I survived all of those years doing all the things that I did and the craziness. And then finally, many, many years later, when I was diagnosed with bipolar, a whole lot of people said, oh, wow, now that all makes sense. People knew I was weird and strange. People have called me crazy my whole life, but it turns out I'm not crazy at all. I just have several different mental illnesses. I have several different forms of PTSD. I have PTSD from my father being a Vietnam vet, and his explosions during my childhood gave me PTSD. He was unpredictable at times, and, you know, I loved my dad. He was my everything, but he was also volatile and volcanic, and he could just go off at any time. And so whenever that happened, I got PTSD from that. Now when I see a man behaving that way, I get a PTSD trigger from that, because my dad exploded every so often, and that gave me PTSD. I've got PTSD from being in the Middle East, from bombs and guns and things. And so, you know, a bus exhaust will go off and I'll be looking for the shooter. And so there are PTSD triggers from all different kinds of things. I have PTSD from being raped. I have PTSD from being in a violent relationship. So there's lots of different types of PTSD that I've dealt with over the years. And I've found that where I am right now in the world, in my house is my haven, my safe place, my refuge. I built myself a bubble that I can live inside, and every so often I can branch out and go out the gate and meet people and go out into the world and be social and be friendly and have fun. But when the world hurts me, I go back to my safe place. I built this for me on purpose. It was a place that I dreamed about for many, many years before I even built it. And this is where I come to when I need to feel safe. Since we're talking about mental illness, let's talk about some of the things I take to treat myself, because you can't just roll along with mental illnesses and not do anything. And I do not have a lot of access to therapy. There is a person I can talk to and go do therapy sessions every so often if I'm feeling a little bit financially flush, but that doesn't happen a lot either. And so what does happen is every so often there's an ayahuasca ceremony, which I attend because I think that's very important. It really helps my mental health. It helps me take care of myself way better than I could if I didn't do the ayahuasca ceremonies, if I didn't have that insight into myself and what I need and have a path for the future. I also do psychedelic mushroom sessions, which is amazing also for looking inside my soul, inside my heart. What do I need? Using mushrooms, I've reconnected with my father who passed away 2 years ago. And I felt like I hadn't left anything unsaid. Almost 10 years ago, I went home to say goodbye, and I knew then that I would never see him again. I knew that his disease would take him. Taking a massive dose of mushrooms one afternoon, I felt like when I saw him, I reconnected with him. He was there in my hallucination, and we sat and we talked, and I felt closure. I felt like I didn't need to grieve anymore because I saw him happy, relaxed, comfortable, peaceful. I saw him as he was when he was a young dad, and it was a magical experience, but I don't know that I'd ever be able to repeat it. That was on shrooms, and that really helped me through my period of grief. And I know there's people out there that will think, this woman is fucking crazy, but that's what helped me get through that period of my life. Basically, whatever works, works. So, let your freak flag fly, because if that's what's going to work, then do it. I also take a lot of cannabis. I ingest cannabis. I'm not a big smoker. Every so often I'll smoke a little pipe, but mostly I'll eat cannabis. I make these most amazing bliss bombs made with locally grown cacao and organic coconut and raisins and peanuts or almonds and walnuts or cashews. I've added dried blueberries before. I've added dried bananas. I'll mix some organic, locally grown cannabis, nicely decarboxylated, into my truffles, and I'll eat one of those whenever I feel the need. So it's not a daily thing. I don't take plant medicines on a daily basis. I take them when I need them, and I also feel like they really stabilize my mental health. I feel like I haven't had a very deep depression for a really long time, and I haven't had a manic episode for a really long time. I've gone through a period of mild depression over the past few years because I lost contact with somebody incredibly important to me. So I've been dealing with that kind of grief, but it's out of my hands. There's absolutely nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can do to change it. And so I'm learning to let it go, and I'm using combinations of ayahuasca and shrooms and cannabis to help me feel better, to help me free myself of the sadness that I feel related to that. And the truth is, I'm probably always going to feel a little bit sad about it because it is kind of tragic. It's a result of the monster that affected our lives so terribly. But I can't change someone else's mind or thought patterns or opinions or behavior. I need to just move on with what I'm doing and trying to be a better me every single day, and trying to keep all these mental illnesses in their little individual boxes. One of those Chinese cabinets with all the little drawers in it, and each little drawer has a little bit of mental illness in it. So I'm trying to keep them all locked at the same time. That's basically our episode about mental illness. It's about my life. It's about things I've been through, my revenge fantasy, which is never going to happen because the monster's already dead and gone, and so is his accomplice. And all the people that think I'm the bad person for that, well, they're not in my life either. So I've kind of been cutting out the dead wood for many years now, just kind of distancing myself from people who have harmed me, whether consciously or subconsciously, and I'm much better for it. I'm in a great place now. I built my dream house. I live in my dream life. And yeah, there are sacrifices that I've made to be here, and I can live with that. Living in my dream, basically. Mentally, for me, the best thing I could have ever done. I probably wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you if I hadn't done something drastic and radical about getting my mental health in order. That's a little bit of my mental health journey, and it's not over yet. I still struggle with things from time to time, but generally I'm in a really good place, and I'm glad that you're here and listening and reading these stories with me, and I'm glad that they're finally getting out in the world 30 years after somebody told me to record them. I'm glad that I was able to branch out a little bit and do a little episode differently to all the other episodes. After this, we're going to continue reading the book, and I'll look forward to you joining me on those journeys when we start off on our travels again. And next week, we're going to be traveling to Ecuador, which is kind of fun because that's where I live. And so it's a story about something that happened here a very long time ago. So I'll see you then. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for your emails. And thank you so much for your questions. That really took me by surprise, some of them, and really made me think about what my answers would be. And so I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next week.
Hey there, love bugs! Welcome to the jungle! I'm Nancy Miarelli, your guide to the ecological and entomological, i.e. bug, wonders of Ecuador. With my master's in entomology and a passion for ecology and conservation, I'm here to take you on an unforgettable adventure through the mega diverse forests and more lush than you may have expected mountainsides of Ecuador. This year, I'm excited to offer 2 unique science-focused tours. Join me for a nature journaling course where we'll sit in the grass, sketch, observe, and reflect on all the creatures and plants that we discovered. Or dive deep into evolutionary theory on my evolution tour, where you'll see what you learned in a book that one time growing on the side of a tree. Ready to embark on a journey of discovery? Visit www.scibugs.info, that is Scibugs, SCIBUGS, to learn more, or find me, Scibugs, everywhere on the internet. Let's explore Ecuador and all it has to offer together.
Do you have any crazy travel stories? What's the most insane thing that happened to you while you were on the road? If you'd like to share, send an MP3 recording of your story or write it into an email and send it to thewitchmob@gmail.com, and it could feature in a future episode. The Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast is created, written, read, produced, edited, mixed and published by BooksByRoni. If you'd like to grab a copy of Few Are Ooh, Travel Tales I Never Told Mom, find the paperback on Amazon or email thewitchpod@gmail.com to get an ebook. Also, let us know via email or on Blue Sky at The Witch Pod if you're reading in a book club or a group of friends so we can give you a shout out. Don't forget to tell us where you are in the world. You can visit The Witch Pod on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music and Castbox, and also Substack and Patreon. See you next week.
Bye!